Hello everyone, back tuning into today's second video. So we're going to have a look at the weather for next week, 10 days for today's second video. This takes us into second half of September. I think going to around 21st of September at day 10, extending a bit beyond that, of course, with the GFS, which goes out to around 2 and a bit weeks. So I'll bring you up to date what's going on there. It looks quite unsettled, but actually it might turn very warm for a time next week, and that's actually partly down to what's going on in the tropical Atlantic right now. So we're going to start off having a look at the tropics. This could have impacts on the weather in Europe and in the UK through next week, so it'll all come together as we go along this, but at the moment it is all happening in the tropics, and we're going to start off with that. Just at the end of the video I'll bring you up to date with the latest ECMWF seasonal model run. Very, very interesting run of the ECMWF seasonal model has shown up yesterday. So I'll bring you up to date with that at the end of the video. But we're going to start off with all the developments in the tropics. So we have got 2 hurricanes, a tropical storm, and then 2 areas of interest. So let's deal with the 2 areas of interest first of all. We've got this one here in the Caribbean, this yellow X just here. Let's see what National Hurricane Center is saying about that. So it's disturbance 1 with a 30% chance of cyclone formation in 48 hours. A large area of disturbed weather over the extreme northwestern Caribbean Sea and the southeastern Gulf of Mexico is associated with a surface trough interacting with an upper level low. Although this activity is showing signs of organisation, there are no signs of surface circulation. Limited development is anticipated today, but upper level winds are forecast to become more conducive to a tropical depression to form on Thursday or Friday while the disturbance moves across the western Gulf of Mexico. Interest across northeastern Mexico and the coast of Texas and Louisiana should monitor the progress of this system. Regardless of development, heavy rain and gusty winds are likely over western Cuba and portions of the northeastern Yucatan Peninsula today. So there's a 30% chance of this developing into a tropical storm in the next 2 days, but in the next 5 days there's actually a 60% chance that this is going to develop into a tropical storm. So things beginning to happen in the Caribbean and in the Gulf of Mexico. Then we've got disturbance 2, which is a long way north. That's an unusually long way north to get an area of tropical activity. This is what they're saying at the moment. A non-tropical area of low pressure is forecast to form along a trough of low pressure located over the northeastern Atlantic Ocean. Environmental conditions are conducive for some development, and a tropical or subtropical depression could form by the end of the week while the low meanders over the northeast Atlantic Ocean. So 10% chance within the next 48 hours of this going tropical, 50% chance though in the next 5 days that this could develop into some sort of subtropical depression. So we've got 2 areas of interest, but then of course we have already got our storms. So we've got at the moment Tropical Storm Isaac just here to the east of the Caribbean. Let's see what the latest is on Isaac. There it is. We've got Tropical Storm Isaac showing up just there. Isaac is forecast to strengthen back up to Category 1 hurricane by the time you get through to tomorrow. And then Isaac moves into these far eastern Caribbean islands, and then carries on into the Caribbean to the south of Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. So there are going to be some impacts from this. It's going to be a tropical storm by the time it gets through into the Caribbean. And I suspect it will bring some quite nasty weather with it as well. So those islands there will need to watch out for Isaac. Then we've got Helene. Helene at the moment is a Category 2 hurricane just there. Helene is not going anywhere near land areas at the moment. This is a forecast track for Helene. Now, Helene is being forecast to actually strengthen up to a Category 3 hurricane, a major hurricane, very briefly, but then going back down to Category 2 and Category 1 in the second half of the week. Away from all land areas, pushing northwards by Sunday, getting into that sort of position as a tropical storm heading up towards the Azores. Now, we've got Spain and Portugal over here. And usually with these charts, even Ireland and the British Isles is showing up just there, northern France just there. So Helene is inching its way towards the western part of Europe. Now, Helene could well have some impacts on the weather in Europe through the course of next week. I think we could see some very warm air being pushed northwards through the course of next week. Possibly some wet and windy weather as well. More about that later. And then finally, we've got Hurricane Florence. Hurricane Florence is just there, heading ever more towards that eastern coast of America. So it's a major Category 4 hurricane now, Hurricane Florence, and it's in that position just there. It's going to be heading eastwards across to the United States. So by Thursday, this major hurricane is going to be in this sort of position. And I'll just show you what the sustained winds with this are. So as I say, it's a Category 4 hurricane, which means it's got sustained winds of 130 miles an hour. It means gusts will be going over 150 miles an hour. Very severe hurricane indeed. So the track of this is to move it towards that coast of Eastern America. That's where it's forecast position is likely to be on Thursday, and then Friday is when it looks like it's going to hit this southeastern coast somewhere around South or North Carolina. Now, they're evacuating on that coast of the Carolinas as we speak. It probably won't hit as a Category 4, but nevertheless, it is going to be a very severe impact. And I just looked at the wind gusts a few minutes ago before I did this video, the forecast wind gusts with this. It is getting quite close to a Category 5, actually, tomorrow and through to Thursday. To get a Category 5, you have to get a sustained wind of 157 miles an hour or more. Its forecast sustained winds is to go up to 150 miles an hour. So it's not going to be all that far away from a Category 5 hurricane. So whether it's Category 4 or Category 5, it's a monster storm, this monster hurricane. It's bearing down on that southeastern coast of America, and there will be some very severe impacts for the Carolinas later on this week. If you're watching this video in the Carolinas, do take all the precautions that you need to take from the advice from NOAA and the National Hurricane Agency. It's going to be severe. It's going to be a direct hit on the Carolinas. At the moment, it's more like it's going to be North Carolina to South Carolina, but it's going to be a very bad strike indeed from major Hurricane Florence. So pretty severe conditions over there. Right, let's come back closer to home, and we're going to have a look at the GFS temperature and precipitation ensembles. Looking at Manchester today, the red line here is the 30-year upper air temperature average for Manchester. We're a bit warmer than average today. It is quite a warm, humid air mass that we've got across England and Wales, particular today. By tomorrow, temperatures will be starting to lower. And then as we go through the rest of the week, it looks relatively cool up to the weekend. Next week, you'll notice we are getting quite a large increase in the upper air temperatures now. This has only been showing up over the last few model runs. It wasn't particularly apparent when we did the video yesterday. But it now looks like we could start to pull up some very warm air, particularly through the early part of next week from the south. Reason that's like to happen is that we're going to have a ridge building across Central Europe with low pressure to our west and southwest, Some of that low pressure will be the remains of Hurricane Helene, what we were just looking at a few minutes ago, and that's going to pump up a lot of warm tropical air into many parts of Europe. So with this increase in temperature, there will probably be a rapid increase in humidity, and there is likely to be some wet and windy weather as well. But whether that wet and windy weather, how extensive it is, got to wait and see. GFS doubles do show an increasingly wet trend through the course of next week for Manchester. Remember, this is one of the wettest places in the country, the northwest of England. So it is trending things increasingly unsettled through the course of next week, after a few drier days through the second half of this week. Temperature anomalies are looking like that, and Europe is turning very warm in the week ahead. This is from the 11th through to the 19th of September. Very warm temperature anomalies across Spain, Portugal, France, into many central parts of Europe, into the east and southeast of Europe as well. For the UK of Rhine, that our temperature anomaly isn't all that far from average. It's a little bit warmer than average. It has trended a little bit warmer on this chart compared to what it was showing yesterday. But we're one of the cooler places in Europe actually here from the 11th to the 19th of September. But they may trend warmer, these charts, over the next few days. Precipitation anomalies are looking like that. So again, the southern and central parts of England and Wales, lots of dry weather from the 11th to 19th of September. It does look a bit wetter in the north and the west. Ireland and Northern Ireland looking quite wet, close to the Atlantic. Many parts of Scandinavia also looking fairly unsettled. Let's talk you through these model runs then. So this is the 6 o'clock run of the GFS. And we've got, this is starting on Friday, we've got high pressure to our south, low pressure to the north. We're bringing in this relatively cool westerly flow across the country. Into the weekend, we've got this ridge building to the south and the east of the country. Its centre is actually across central parts of Europe, just there from Germany through to Poland, with low pressure out to the northwest. Now this, just here, this area of low pressure to the west of Portugal, very close to the Azores, that is the remains of Hurricane Helene. It may still be a tropical storm at that point, but certainly it'll likely be a vigorous area of low pressure. Even if it's gone subtropical or post-tropical, will still be a vigorous area of low pressure. It might even still be just about a tropical storm. It does show, in terms of the precipitation, quite a circulation there around that low pressure indicator, but it might still have, it certainly has some tropical sort of elements within it, whether or not it's a tropical storm at this point. It'll probably be post-tropical, but it certainly has some tropical elements still there within it at that point on Sunday. As we go through to the early part of next week, this area of low pressure starts to get dragged closer towards Portugal and begins to head up towards the northwest of Europe. We've also got this secondary area of low pressure that's developing in the middle of the Atlantic. So the Atlantic does look very buoyant. It looks very active in the Atlantic. And what happens, though, is that this starts to pump up warmth not only from sort of the tropical Atlantic, it's associated with that area of low pressure that was Helene. It also starts to drag up quite warm air out of sort of Africa, Spain, Portugal as well. And so the upshot is that we get this push of really quite intense heat across many parts of Spain and Portugal, intense for the time of year. Spain and Portugal, and heading up towards France as well. That's how we go into Wednesday. Again, we've got this high pressure across central, eastern parts of Europe, and low pressure is out to west. This is the remains of Helene just there, heading towards Spain and Portugal by that point, and kind of being absorbed into this main area of low pressure that is out to the northwest of the UK. There's the upper air temperatures for Wednesday next week. They look hot, can you believe? Hot air is being pushed northwards out of North Africa and the tropical Atlantic, covering many, particularly western parts of Europe, and some of that is getting into the UK as well. However, there's an active cold front that's lying in that sort of position, waiting to move in and shove all of that warmth and heat out of the way, and that's exactly what happens. So by Thursday, we start to push that cold front across the country. By then, you can't really see where Helene's gone. So it's just become absorbed, I think, within this area of low pressure and the cold front that's heading in from off the Atlantic. There's the upper air temperatures for Thursday next week, with extensive warmth and heat across many parts of Europe, pushing up to Scandinavia too. But the cold front is already introducing cooler and fresher air into the northwest, into Ireland, and into the UK as well. Now, that could involve heavy rain. It might even involve thunderstorms. We haven't had many thunderstorms through this season. It's been a very poor summer now into early autumn for thunderstorms. That might be the one that's going to deliver something quite extensively convective. We'll have to wait and see on that. By the time you get through to the end of next week, all of that has gone through, and we're into a much cooler, fresher Atlantic flow once again. And then going to extended rain, so just a little bit beyond day 10, still looking unsettled, wet and windy conditions moving in from the Atlantic on this particular run of the GFS. But of course, it's a long way out that. We probably shouldn't take it overly seriously. But just going back to this warmth that we see pushing northwards here through the middle part of next week, just there, if that came off, it could well get temperatures at least up to the mid to upper 20s Celsius. It would depend on cloud, but we may not be finished yet with temperatures going into the 80s Fahrenheit. So it's probably a very brief plume of really hot air due to how unstable things are in the Atlantic. But it could be noteworthy what's happening there through the course of next week. East WF is looking like this, so again starting rather cool and showery on Friday into the weekend. Again, it's looking rather showery really, not a great deal going on in the south. We're under a ridge, so probably a lot of dry weather in the south over the weekend, a little bit showery in the north, and temperatures probably close to average. This is taking us through to the start of next week, so I think this one on this chart would be the remains of Hurricane Helene, and we go into the extended range, and possibly that one just there actually is Helene. It's very difficult with these vigorous areas of low pressure to pinpoint which ones have tropical origins and which ones are just general areas of low pressure. So up to the middle of next week anyway, we've got this very vigorous area of low pressure just here around Greenland, Iceland, also that one down there close to the Azores. That one is probably going to be the remains of Helene. Again, same idea though as the GFS, with all this low pressure out here and this tropical sort of, or post-tropical feature, bringing a lot of warmth up from the tropical Atlantic. We also have this ridge building across central parts of Europe, and that's pulling air up from North Africa and the Med too. So the ECM also has suddenly gone much warmer through the middle part of next week, the 15 Celsius iceberg pushing up across England and Wales. Into the extended range, this takes us to day 10, which is Friday, 21st of September. We don't get that push from the Atlantic that the GFS is showing. So even up to day 10, we still have this ridge here across central parts of Europe with low pressure out here. And still we're bringing up some very warm air from the south, so that's a more extended run of very warm conditions. That's how the upper air temperatures look at day 10. So this is where the cold front will be waiting out in the Atlantic to head in and push that heat away into central parts of Europe. That's a little bit more extensive compared to the GFS for very warm or maybe even hot conditions next week. And then the GEM looks like that, so low pressure to the north, high pressure to the south start us off, and we go into an unsettled spell through into the early part of next week, maybe a little bit more unsettled compared to the other two models. This takes us to the middle of next week, so again we've got the same idea here. We've got the low pressure out to the west. Some of this is probably involving the remains of Helene as well, with high pressure across central eastern parts of Europe. That pulls the air up from the south in that sort of fashion. So the upper air temperatures are looking second half of next week, still very warm air in the southeast. Probably not quite as hot as the other two models are showing, but even so, very warm conditions maintained through the middle of next week. And that takes us to day 10, with a bit of a cut-off low forming off the coast of Portugal and Biscay. High pressure by then. It's a long way away from us over across the east part of Europe. But this cooler air in the Atlantic is struggling to move in. So if we have a look at the upper air temperatures, we see they are still very warm or hot, particularly across England and Wales. This is just something that's cropped up in the very latest model runs. This chance of something very warm, possibly quite hot happening next week, but unstable with a risk of heavy showers, thunderstorms, and maybe even an active cold front bringing a dramatic sort of thundery type spell, and then cooler air moving in from the west. It involves tropical storm and hurricane features, so or the remains of them. So that adds an extra layer of uncertainty. We've got to watch this space, monitor what's going on here, but potentially a very, very interesting week coming up next week with some dramatic weather potentially on the way. Finally, I just said, I did say that I'd let you have a look at the latest ECMWF seasonal model update. So this is the mean sea level pressure anomaly from the ECMWF for the winter of 2018-19. And it looks like the model's going for a cold winter with high pressure being centred to the north of Europe, so centred around Scandinavia and to the north of the British Isles. We've got low pressure down here through the central part of the Atlantic. This is where the jet stream would be as well. The low pressure is going into kind of like Spain, Portugal, the Med. And of course, we've got this high pressure to the north. That would be feeding in the air from the east across much of northern Europe, and the British Isles would be included in that as well. ECMWF looks like it's going for a cold winter, certainly in terms of the pattern anyway, for the winter of 2018-19. We will have a full rundown on the ECMWF seasonal model out. This is just a little sneak peek. Have a full rundown on it at some point later in the month. It will either be this coming Sunday or more likely the following week, the following Sunday, but there will be a full and detailed analysis of the ECMWF seasonal model update, which will cover winter of 2018-19. But coming back to the next week's 10 days, lots of interest now for next week. Looks like we could get a spell of very warm, potentially quite hot weather, but also unstable. There might be heavy rain, there might be gale force winds, there could even be thunderstorms as well. Very difficult to say how long any increase in the temperature goes on for. It might only be a one-day wonder sometime around Tuesday or Wednesday, or it might actually be something that extends over several days if that low pressure containing the remains of Helene was to stall in the middle of the Atlantic. That might leave us in a southerly flow for a few days. So let's wait and see what's going to happen there. Could be in for some very interesting weather conditions, to say the least, next week. All very similar to what happened last year with the remains of Hurricane Helene. I'm sure you remember that very well. It looks quite similar to that kind of setup. So maybe we'll get some of those dramatic sort of skies again that we had last October when Hurricane Helene, or the remains of Hurricane Helene, paid us a visit. We'll have to wait and see, but certainly some quite interesting weather coming up in the next week to 10 days. Right, that's all for now. Tomorrow, I have 5-day forecast. We'll have more on those tropical storms and hurricanes, and of course the weather for next week to 10 days as well. So come back for all of the updates tomorrow. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.